You're in Kassel, Germany?
I am in Kassel, Germany.
Where's that?
It's literally if you're trying to find the middle of Germany on a map, it's right there.
Oh,
So if
okay.
you want to take Germany and kind of like put it the middle and spin the whole country around, you would pick Kassel. The beauty of it is everything is 2 hours. The real bad thing about it is everything is 2 hours.
How long does it take to drive all the way across Germany?
That's a great question, and also the right answer is it depends because there's no speed limit, right? So it kind of like really depends on the time of day and the car you're driving. But by American standards, I want to say it's probably 8 hours.
Okay. That seems like normal for a country or a state.
Yeah.
So
It also depends if you're going to go north south or if you want to go east west. So it's I think it's twice the length north south than it is east west.
Okay. You mentioned the speed limit. I was just hearing the other day about new speed limit laws in England and how they are trying to basically become a totalitarian regime in England. And one of the things they're doing is if you're even going, so they've lowered the speed limits to 20 miles an hour. And if they're even going 2 miles an hour over, you get a ticket, and you only get 3 tickets and you lose your license because they're on that big just like green planet move where they're trying to reduce their carbon so hard that they're punishing their own people, which just
Really?
makes no sense. Yeah. It's like Ireland saying they're going to kill all their cows, and they're like, this is going to save the planet. And then, but the reality is China's opening up like a new coal factory every day.
Yeah, but then that's also kind of like a different story. Like I think the truth somewhere is like in between there. Like China's not opening up a new coal factory every single day. I mean, it's pretty coal heavy, the entire industry. But with the speed limit, that's interesting. I heard California is kind of like trying to establish something very similar in the Bay Area, kind of like as a pilot. I didn't know they're already doing that in England.
Oh man, I mean in the Bay Area that makes sense, but I mean in San Diego and Southern California, everybody drives like they drive in Germany. They drive as fast as they want.
Yeah, it's fun.
Oh
But the
man,
fun thing is with Germany, like the speed limit, you really have like there's like a lot of rules to not having any rules, you know.
there's a lot of rules and not having rules. What do you mean?
Well, there's like first of all, everyone really knows how to drive, so you kind of like your driver's ed and driver's education and how do you get your license, you really have to kind of like study it. You have to kind of like, you know, get behind the wheel and do a lot of yeah, driving school things, you know, like and then the test, it's kind of tough, and it's really you get prepared to like drive in a world where there's no speed limit. Also, you can never ever pass on the right hand side, right? So like the only fast lane is literally the left lane, and of course not all like segments of the autobahn are without a speed limit. If you're like in a city, then there's no like free for all go.
So you get proper training though, and then
Yeah, ideally.
do people drive slow in the left lane, or do they get run off the road?
That's the old saying. So the left lane, the fast lane is no picnic, the left lane is war. But yeah, it's interesting. So like, but people understand, you know, like if you have to go fast, then they usually get out of your way.
Yeah, I mean in the States, people are driving on the left-hand side constantly. And it's a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
Like they say you can't pass on the right, but people are going 10 miles below the speed limit in the left lane, just causing traffic issues. So
Yeah,
are the cops good about pulling people over if they're driving slow in the left lane in Germany?
they do actually. Yeah, they do.
Okay, you never see that happen here.
Yeah. No, they do. They
Okay.
literally like pull people over if you don't give like someone like a fair chance to pass, as they call it. They're definitely gonna pull you over, and it's gonna be like, hey, you cannot drive that slow. There, this person behind you is trying to pass you several times. You should have like moved your freaking slow ass out of the way.
I wish we could get that here. It would make everything easier. You ever come across just a roadblock? You got like 3 cars going the same speed. You can't get around any of them.
Yeah, well, you have that here with trucks. Like you have kind of like a lot of trucks trying to pass each other, and then you like get stuck behind them for several miles, fall asleep behind the wheel, and oh, okay, I'm like, well, free road again, and you go.
That's funny. So I was trying to open up with a green conservation business talk. We got a little bit on left lane driving, but this is your specialty, right? So you're going around and teaching people about doing sustainable business practices.
Um, I don't think I'm the right person to be the preacher of how to run a fully like sustainable business, because I'm trying to be more understanding of what business needs there actually are in terms of running a sustainable business. And for me, first of all, that means a financial sustainable business, because you cannot have any impact without profit, right? Like if you focus so much on the things that are be there to be like 100% green or whatever that even means, and you're losing money along the way, then A, there's no incentive for you business to act that way, and B, you cannot sustain it literally. Like there's no point for a business to go out of business, to go broke just because you're trying to really be fully sustainable. And that's literally one thing I see happening in Germany a lot. They really demand or kind of like claim, like it's a little bit of both, like they have certain rules implemented by the government to have those sustainability criteria, as well as a lot of businesses kind of like claim to go that sustainable route. But if you're in global competition, it's really hard to do that, right? So like, how do you keep your sustainable claims in your business going on if your competition is literally in another country and not giving a crap about what it's actually affecting the environment? So I think the middle way kind of is a good answer there. It's a little bit of, we don't need 10 businesses who are 100% sustainable. I think we need 1,000 businesses that are 80% sustainable.
That makes sense. I mean, capitalism, the true heart of capitalism is buy low, sell high, right? So whenever you're manufacturing a product, the initial goal is always to get product manufacturing costs as low as possible. And when you're following sustainable guidelines, especially when other people aren't, how can you even stay competitive in the market?
Yeah, correct. And it's something really seeing here what is kind of like a huge conflict for that, right? And that's why I think we need better structures and we need better understandings, and of really what we need is transparency of the real costs of the products, as I like to call it, and really showcase that, as a business. Like really be open about it, be transparent about it, tell your customers what you're doing, why you're doing it. And the challenge really is to do it at a compatible price point. Reality is sustainability only works if it is done at a compatible price point. And a compatible price point is the exact same price point. The idea of people are willing to spend more money because the product is sustainable is an illusion, right? So like we've tested it, I've seen it in so many cases. Every anonymous survey, people will tell you, yeah, pay €1 more, yeah, pay $1 more. But when they're in the store and actually making the buying decision, they don't, right? So they feel anonymous when it comes to the spending. And this is where literally push hits the shelf, and it's happening over and over again that to really make a difference in a sustainable world, you have to compete at a price level, and it can be done. It can be done. You just have to have other advancements. You might have to cut into your own margins. You have to be smarter. You have to have better processes, and you can really do it. And once those sustainable criterias are established, they'll will become a hygiene factor. Once our people are used to those kind of methods, they will not go back.
Yeah, you keyed in on, I think, one of the biggest points, and it's when people are buying at the store. So you might have all of the messaging and purpose and everything behind a brand. People might be aware of it, but when you're at a store picking something out, you don't choose with your frontal cortex part of your brain. You buy emotionally generally, and money is very tied to emotion. And so when you see a $20 choice or a $15 choice, you're going to think, you're not thinking about the sustainability of a said product. In most cases, you're thinking about paying rent or buying food that week or the trip you have to take and saving that money. I think that that's probably one of the biggest hurdles, is how do you get point of purchase decision making to change?
Yeah, as you said, you can only spend every dollar only once, and you competing literally for every dollar. And it's a lot of times especially crucial when it's a kind of like a need item rather than a nice to have item. And the emotional being of whatever I buy, how does it make me feel, or what need does it fulfill, right? So I'm kind of like finding the balance there, I think, is something that's very, very crucial to think about for every product you bring to market. And again, for me as a manufacturer, the biggest challenge really is, how do you compete on a price level with other products that are not sustainably made or that are more harmful? And that's why I think sustainability on the product side is kind of like an iteration, right? So you cannot be 100% sustainable and compete with products who are 0% sustainable. You kind of really have to slowly increase while keeping the same price point.
That makes sense. I think the biggest comparison I can make is in America right now, there's the Make America Healthy Again movement, right? Everybody's getting tired of seed oils and corn syrup and all of these manufactured food dyes. I mean, if you're saying it doesn't have an effect, you're being ignorant at this point. There's so much evidence. There's so much proof that corruption at the top level, people taking payments to say sugary and carb-loaded things are good for you. But when companies are turning around and trying to use good ingredients, I think now they're finding that the manufacturing chains aren't able to support real ingredients at a low cost anymore, because they've all been using these knockoff filler ingredients like seed oils and corn syrup that are really cheap to make, but what was I trying to say? Yeah, so they're cheap to make, but it's evident that people want the real ingredients. But all of these companies have shareholders, And the fiduciary responsibility of any company with shareholders is to maximize profits. And so all these CEOs and board members and everything that are saying, this is what the people want, but in order to keep our jobs and keep making X amount of dollars, we need to keep improving profits. And so have you had any conversations with board members or executives like that, where they're trying to balance giving the people what they want with keeping their investors and shareholders happy with their returns?
Yeah, it's a very loaded topic, right? To like go into that. And I mean, there's literally certain parts, and especially in the US, where your shareholders can sue you as the CEO of the company if there's evidence that you're not maximizing profit. So this is why I think we really need to find better ways of structuring businesses, right? So it's certain parts that can be handled differently. And one thing, one way I structured one of my companies is becoming a California social purpose corporation. And that really what it does, it allowed us to write into our business DNA that we're not solely focusing on optimizing profit, but we also have two other criteria, right? It's the typical social enterprise structure that everyone claims they're doing, but we were able to write it into our business DNA. So the triple bottom line of taking care of the people, the planet, and the profit, the 3Ps. So we wrote in that every product we bring to market has to be sustainably made, and that every product we bring to market has to have an educational purpose, right? So that we can educate. In our case, we're in the toy industry, children's toys. So we want to have an educational value that the product kind of like talks about. So, and by choosing this business structure, we still can optimize for profit, but we also have two other ingredients that needs to be taken care of the way we run our business.
Okay, so let me flesh this out. So if you're an existing corporation, you have board members, you have shareholders, you have bylaws. What you would need to do is present a motion to amend your bylaws to your board and to your shareholders, saying, "Hey, we need to change directions as a company. This is where the industry is going." And then by changing the bylaws to support the new direction, you're in essence protecting your job, because as a shareholder, you get a vote. As a board member, you get a vote. And if they all vote to make that change, then legally, you are then doing what the company requested of you as an executive. And
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. And then
you got to start inside with your company and then do it. So don't just make the changes and expect your board members and your shareholders to be happy with you. First, get them on board, and then make the changes.
yeah, 100%. And there's more and more of those kind of requests how this is gonna be handled, right? And the in terms of like impact investment, or like having ESG goals and all of that. How do you measure your impact? How do you show that? And this is something that's can be done, in a way that is, and it might not be valuable or suitable, like for all companies to do that, but it's definitely a move and a path in the right direction. And if you can show that this model, that this scenario, is also able to attract equally amount of money, or is even considered being more sustainable, meaning financially sustainable, than your other counterpart that is not taking care of those kind of issues, then we are winning the game, like by literally showing cases where companies are higher valued because they're taking care of all those different aspects and are not solely exist for profit optimization of their shareholders.
I like that. I mean, it's got to be hard to convince a board of the profitability and growth of a company suggesting these changes, because you're literally walking in and saying, hey, we're going to take this super cheap ingredient and replace it with a more expensive ingredient, or this super inexpensive process, and we're going to add 3 steps to it. It's going to make it more expensive. We're going to add 30% to our bottom line. And I mean, how do you walk in and make that argument? Like,
Yeah, and there are certain ways that go towards that, right? And that's, I think, is very different in the US than it is to other parts of the world, especially the EU, where there are regulations kind of like happening around that. The way I rather want to see it, because I usually not the biggest fan of regulating anything by the government, in terms of like, hey, this is how you have to run your business and all of that. But at certain points, it really is needed. And I got asked that the other day on another podcast, right? What is um, my understanding of free enterprise, right? And I said, for me, it means I can run the business, my business, in any way I want it without hurting anyone else, right? And I think that's a really good definition. And it's something where transparency really is crucial, and where companies and corporations need to be held accountable for the true cost of their product, right? Like if I have some sort of gimmick or something that is happening, well, let's again take the toy industry for example. No one is paying pretty much for what is happening with all those plastic toys at the end of life, and when they gonna get disregarded, end up in landfills, it's literally zero cost. No one really thinks about that, what is happening to those kind of products, right? If we take the beverage industry, it used to be like that. Now bottle deposits, or the CRV, as what is it called in California, container recycling value fee, whatever it is, it's kind of like a standard, right? So but we need to establish those kind of scenarios. For me, really a circular economy is the key. Like I'm really all for consumerism. I think it's beautiful. We would not be having this conversation right now if no one would have made money, like with the computers in front of us, with the technology, to having the Wi-Fi, with having those video streams and all of that. Someone eventually is making money with doing all of that. We just need to find better ways to evaluate the real cost of the products and what impact it has on the planet, on the people, and on the shareholder sides, of course.
yeah, I think you keyed it on a good point. With your definition of free market activity, is do what you want as long as you don't harm anybody, right? I think
Yeah.
that I think that's about as simple as it can get. I think it's the leadership positions, not at every company, but at some companies, you just see them doing whatever they have to do, which is sad. But I think that where does the line of oversight come from with that methodology, though? I mean, you can see it kind of happening in the US, like with the FDA. Now we have issues with them. Hopefully they're getting straightened out again. But, 30, 40, 60 years ago, I think when they were started, America was a dump. People were literally dumping their toxic waste into rivers, uh, just dumping in empty lots wherever they wanted. There's just trash everywhere. And it took a lot of effort to clean up our ecosystem from that. And I think most of America's done a pretty good job. And you look at extreme examples like in India, in the River Ganges, like it's pure trash. You can't go in the water without getting sick because everybody just goes and dumps. That's what the Hudson River used to be like in New York. Luckily, we have a RFK Jr. that was an environmental lawyer and was able to clean up the river, get factories to stop dumping. But how do you protect against that oversight overreaching? How do you protect against them turning into Ireland saying we have to kill all of the cows because cows are ruining the planet, a creature that's existed for, in some version or another, hundreds of millions of years? How do you protect against extremism like that?
Yeah, and that's a very very difficult topic, to talk about. And first of all, I'm actually not aware about this island saying that they're literally killing all the cows. So like I don't know if
It's
that
actually
it's really
happening. Yeah, it was a big
really
story last year where they're like, we have to hit our carbon emissions for the EU, so we're going to kill all the cows and then
real. But
import
then
all
but they make Kerrygold, like all the cool butter is coming from Ireland.
yeah.
Really?
But then they were saying they were going to import their beef. So then you're putting beef on a ship that uses fuel from another country that's just going to increase their beef capacity. So while their short-term carbon goals, their carbon neutral 2050 or 2030 or whatever the EU has, is saying that they have to reduce their carbon emissions. And so if they import the beef from another country, it's not their carbon issue anymore, government or policy wise, because they're not producing it anymore. So even though it's going to use more carbon to import beef, they're saying that it's going to help them with their policy and meet their goals set by the EU. And I could be a little bit off base on all of this, but this is my memory from like a year ago when it was happening. So this is just a ridiculous situation where the obvious answer is there, but because of pressure being put on by EU politics and policies, they have to do something that's insane like this in order to meet their goals.
Yeah. And as we kind of see right now, right, and figuring out, it's not an easy topic to kind of like take care of or like answer it. And there's a lot of smart and clever people working on those kind of things and policies, and there's all of that. And where do you draw the line, right? For me, it always comes really down to the customer, right? To like understand the end customer is like, we hold all the power, right? Every day we vote with our shopping receipts. We vote where we buy, who we buy from, what we do with all of that, right? We don't elect someone every 4 years and hope for the best, or every 5 years, or whatever the term is, right? So like I think that's kind of like there. And in the toy industry, I get asked that a lot about sustainability. People telling me, Malta, I've been in the toy industry for 30 years. It's always a topic about sustainability and it never worked. Why do you think this time it's different? And for me, it's this, right? We all have our smartphones now. We all have a camera. We can document things. We can literally keep everyone accountability on an immediate base. And I think the media power has kind of like shifted, right? When you mentioned earlier, Greg, about the US used to be the factories dumping stuff into the rivers, and no one cared about, because they were only newspapers and maybe some TV to kind of like report about that, right? And it's, in my opinion, kind of like a little bit naive to think about, oh, there was no corruption happening. It's like, really? Why would I not? If my goal as the company is to maximize profit, why would I not try to bribe the journalist and tell them it's like, there is nothing happening here, And it's exactly that. And now we kind of like are able to literally take that power back and documented things. And there's so many examples where this already has happened, and the different protests and then government turnovers that happened in the past, like in the Middle East and all of that. They literally use social media to express their voices. And as you said, when it gets complicated is when it gets over-regulated, right? When you still have the people on the top that decided, this is stuff that should not be reported about it. So we see it as a threat of the nation and ban the social media, right? So, and it's really still happening. It's always been happening. And the first thing is to really be aware of that and then calling it out. There are people out there who are not acting in your best interest, that you might call the politicians for the people. They are acting on the interests of the corporations.
I get that. So I heard the other day, and this is not an argument against wasteful usage and or against finding things that are recyclable, but just the general carbon discussion and global warming. I heard that, and this is from NASA, from the astronauts going around the world measuring, that the Earth is 20% greener than it was a few decades ago. And that turns out plants like carbon. And then because there's more carbon dioxide in the air, the pores in the plant cell membranes are actually shrinking because they don't need to be as big to breathe. And so now plants don't need as much water either. And so more arid places are even more rapidly getting greener because the plants can use less water because their breathing pores are smaller. And I find this fascinating because the whole global warming issue that everybody's scared of is that we're going to run short on food supply, or the nature is just going to get so violent it's going to destroy us all. But it actually seems that nature likes it. I've heard one scientist once say, you shouldn't be scared of global warming because plants like warm. You should be scared of global cooling because then all of our crops would die and we'd have shorter seasons.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? And that's, for me, again, the narrative of the ones in power, who've been pushing that for years, maybe decades. And it's interesting how those headlines have changed. It was global cooling, global warming. Now we just call it climate change. But what it really is that the climate is changing, no matter what. And I find it very fascinating that we live in this illusion of going to school, learning about those different eras of the planet. That is the ice age, that is, the hot season and all of that. And as you said, plants adapt, we have Darwin, survival of the fittest. That's literally happening very, very fast, especially with certain types of plants, right? That we do have a lot of CO2 emissions that are man-made because of the Industrial Revolution and all of that. That's absolutely undoubtable, right? But the impact it really has on the entire planet is very much to a point where, are we overestimating that? And is it really that harmful, right? So what does climate change really mean? Is it that we are now trying to control the climate, right? Are we trying to control the planet, that it keeps kind of catering to the lifestyle that we have built so far? So I've been talking years about that we should not focus too much of stopping climate change, which a lot of organizations are still kind of propagating about, but we need to talk about how do we adjust towards climate change, right? What does it mean if the climate on planet Earth is getting warmer? How is it affecting us? What are the negative things, increased wildfires, all of those kind of stuff, increased tornadoes in certain areas, right? But also, what are the positive things? Because that's just like yin and yang. There's
It's
positives and
just
there's
change.
negative things. Yeah, exactly. Things are changing, and as you said, that's like plants love warmer weather. That's really what it is. And honestly, you can probably ask anyone out there who you'd rather be, like in cold ice Siberia, or out there like in the Caribbean or in Southern California,
Yeah.
where the sun is out all the time, right? It makes something. It definitely has affected our mood every single day if we are in warm or in colder climate. And it's the same happening with animals and plants and all of that. I mean, Greenland, it's completely under the ice, but where does the name come from? Greenland. That's they wouldn't have called that if it's always been like under the ice forever.
Yeah, I think if you look at like a species density, go to a cold climate, tell me how many different animals you see, or go to a rainforest and tell me how many different animals you see. As long as there's water, and heat, it's gonna work great. I mean,
Yeah.
it's cold climates, they call them tundras. Tundras are deserts. I mean, desert doesn't specify warm or cold, it's amount of rainfall. So a dry climate, never going to be great. But the warmer the earth, the more, ice melts. Yeah, and we're losing some ice caps and everything. But the more water evaporates, the more it rains, the more water is dispersed across the planet. So, I mean, I think we're just along for the ride. I think it's part of the human condition to think that we can control everything in our environment.
Yeah. Well,
And I
control is
think
an
it's,
illusion, you know that.
yeah, and I think it's part of a politician's job is to try and control their people. Really, they should be guiding their people, leading their people, but I think a lot of politicians try to control their people. And I think that the guise of climate change, because it's a forever fear tactic. Like you never need a solution. You can always incite fear and that you have the solution and only you can save it. And it's something that now every single person that comes in power, it's a negotiation tactic. It's a totalitarian fear regime to continue to push people to give up liberties and freedoms and provide more oversight and more rules that people have to follow or else.
Yeah, and then it's been like happening throughout history over and over again, right? And it's all there. And for me, it's still kind of like mind-boggling that people are so naive, honestly, in believing everything the government nowadays says is the right thing, right? And honestly, especially here in Germany, because there was the Nazi regime, and now everyone like this cannot happen again, and so like this and that. So like our politicians now need to do all of those kind of things, and I always wonder, like, why do you think they do that, right? So, like, and why do they think they tell you the truth just because you say so? Like, now they elected ones, they also know what Nazi Germany was, and this cannot happen again. No, it's literally up to every one of us to keep them in check every single time, right? And the illusion of they're not gonna lie is pretty naive, Like, I mean, you have two kids, Craig. So like, and tell me, like, to get something from your kids to do something. I mean, have you always been telling the truth for them to do something certain, right? Like, why would you do that as a government? Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I have a toddler. The truth is not always there. Like you always want to tell the truth, but sometimes it's like you got to convince them to move along a little bit.
Yeah. Well,
But, yeah,
nothing. This can never hurt. Go.
that's funny. Oh man, while we're on government oversight, I've seen you have a few good conversations with people about tariffs. And I know since you're in product manufacturing and international business, you've been able to provide some good insights into this. So I'm curious, What after having a bunch of conversations with people and some debates, what are your feelings on how this is going to affect, I guess, the market short term and long term?
First of all, it's affecting the market massively. This is one of the biggest disruptions we have ever seen in the global supply chain. Probably as big as when the world decided to use China as their factory. And now we kind of like seeing everything going reverse. And it's gonna be very interesting to see how this will all pan out. What I have been observing, and I want to say, like, I have literally no political agenda, right? Like, I don't care if you're pro Trump, if you're pro China, like pro anything, I'm pro reality, and this is where we're at now. And the things that are happening is that we have made tremendous technology advancements, and we should use the current situation to rethink how we manufacture stuff. And my suggestion is that we really use this as an opportunity to do it better, right? So we've talked about stuff creating for the landfills, everything, the true cost of a product, what happens to products after they reach the end of life. With every product will eventually, and then it goes back to the planet, or the ocean or wherever, right? But like we might even come up with ideas to shoot it into space, but stuff literally doesn't magically disappear unless we design it to do it, right? And there are ways to do it. That's why I'm a big advocate for the circular economy. And my belief is that the only way to really take care of this planet is a circular economy where we manufacture as local as it gets and using the resources we have locally where they are, right? So kind of creating a circular system that starts with the product design, it gets manufactured as locally as it gets, and after that, we're not gonna like dump it on a landfill or throw it into the ocean or shoot it into space. We put it back into the supply chain, right? The material becomes a raw material again after its end of life.
I think that's smart. I think that's, not to be blunt, but definitely a pipe dream. I think I'd like to see that, and most especially with food production. I think that, importing animal from halfway across the world, how is that fresh? How is that good? Importing oranges from Florida to Northern Europe, what do you have to do to make sure that those stay good? How does that help a situation? I mean, I know people like their oranges in Northern Europe, I'm sure, and their limes and their lemons and their pineapples and all of that. I know you like your blueberry quesadillas.
I do love my blueberry quesadillas.
Yeah, but berries don't grow in Germany, right?
They do, they do. I have a full pack of blueberries in the fridge at all times.
Mm.
I do also have a pineapple here, which does not grow in Germany.
No, no, they don't. Yeah, it's a real predicament. I mean, like, I know my near plans for the future are to buy a house and have a garden and grow some things. Like, I want to grow my own tomatoes and my own potatoes because they're things that you can store all year long and you use a lot of them. I make a lot of tomato sauce. It's something my family did growing up. Or I use a lot of tomato sauce, like for pastas, marinara, all that. So why not grow it, jar it myself? But that's only some of it. Like, what else would I have to do? I gotta get, probably 1.5 cows per year for my family. I'd probably go through like 20 chickens a year. Having chickens for eggs, these things, a lot of them are doable. Have a milk cow, get fresh milk every morning. but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of maintenance. I'd have to completely learn how to do all of it because the last person in my family that did it was my grandpa when he was a teenager, and that was 60 years ago. So, I mean, I did some gardening growing up, but I don't know how to take care of animals or livestock. Uh, I'd have to relearn how to do some gardening, the times a year to plant, how to plant properly, sun versus shade or partial for certain types of crops, and how much water, what pesticides work or don't work in an area, or natural ways for farming, like let's get goats to eat all the weeds or ladybugs to kill the aphids. So like there's a huge learning curve, and it might take me a few years to get big enough crops where I can actually, support my family for those things. And I know that I'm rare in the fact that I actually had a garden as a kid. I know a lot of people didn't. So, how do we even see a future where that could be a potential for locally harvested and sustainable food practices for families?
Yeah, and it's a difficult topic to answer because we do not live in societies anymore than we used to, right? It really changed drastically. We see an urbanization that is kind of crazy, like in the US, you have major cities, biggest one probably like New York City and then Los Angeles, which there is no urban space for farming or anything like that. And sure, like there's certain ways to do some like micro farming and doing all of that. But then we think about major, massive cities like in Asia. Like, I mean, a small city in China is probably what, 5 million people, 5 million inhabitants. That's massive, right? And as humans, we're not really capable of doing all those farming, for our own families, for our own block, or for whatever, right? Like one of the most beautiful things we do as humans is we collaborate with each other, right? We share the workload, and there are ways we developed how to do those kind of certain things, how to grow food for the masses, how to feed everyone, and there's ways to do it more sustainable in lights with harmony with the planet, and it's definitely not an easy task, definitely not an easy topic. The good thing always with food is it's bioproducts, right? So it kind of like they can be composted, they can be thrown in landfill, they usually like disappear, no matter where they kind of like come from. It's kind of like typical biological like waste that goes away, right? So the big issue with other things is with other products that are not in the food space. I think we need to like treat them a little bit more like food, right? So like I've been talking about that in the toy industry. If we can think about toys the way we think about produce, right? Like, and especially from a retail perspective, is it works so well to establish like a consumer product that gets consumed. Like, let's take popcorn, for example, right? I buy my popcorn in the store and I need to keep rebuying it. I need to keep rebuying it, but it disappears and becomes something compostable, right? Or like goes down the sewer, whatever way, it kind of like gets back out there, right? It doesn't end up on a landfill except the packaging, but there are also ways to take care of that, right? So, but this is the way of this biological process we need to think about, and especially in the toy industry, which is one of the biggest plastic pollutants in the world. And really having a kid interact with a toy is not that they will play with it for years and decades to come, right? Which the product is made for, which plastic is based on, like the best gases of plastic to biocompose is like 500 to 1,000 a year. And this is not how long a kid will play with the toy, right? So what we really need to start doing is thinking about the toy kind of like the pineapple or the banana we buy into the store. We'll have it, we consume it, and a day later, we need to already have in mind from the product design what is happening with that toy that is no longer needed.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a way to make plastic out of banana peel, right?
There's a certain way. There's way to do it. Like I've actually know a really cool company. They're making those. When you go to like a hotel, like a Hilton or something like that, they always kind of have like those little slippers. They're making that from banana peels right now. So I met them in the Philippines. Super super smart girl, and she came up with that super cool product.
That's fantastic. I love that I just threw that out there and then that's actually a real thing.
Yeah.
What is the craziest transformation you've seen as far as somebody using a eco-friendly thing like a banana peel to make product?
The craziest thing, I think it was really like those kind of slippers that I really like, but I also think what is really big coming up, and I think there's a lot of potential to really change the whole packaging industry, is by focusing on biodegradable materials, and algae are really happening there. So like
Algae.
algae, yeah, like algae, seaweed, kind of using those kind of like to replace the typical plastic wrappers and stuff like that. So that's really cool. Other stuff that's not so much in kind of like replacing something, but they now have mushrooms eating away plastic waste, which is kind of cool to think about. And yeah,
Mushrooms are the
there's a
answer to everything on this planet.
yeah, it's
I
not
swear
just
by
us
it.
eating the mushrooms, it's also the mushrooms eating our trash away.
Yeah, mushrooms eat oil spills. Mushrooms eat plastic. Mushrooms can eat radiation out of the dirt. Uh, what else can they do? I mean, they can decompose pretty much anything as long as you find the right mushroom.
Isn't that always the truth?
They can they can definitely decompose my what do I want to say? Decompose my shadow spirit or whatever. Make me a happy person.
Yeah,
Like,
if you dose it right, they're literally gonna eat your ego.
right? Eat your ego. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Eat my ego. That's it. Okay, Malta. I've had a fantastic conversation. What is something that you would like to end on? You want to promote something? You want to encourage people to do something?
I want to encourage people to read my book. To be honest, that's something I'm passionate about. And if you ask me so directly, what do I want to promote? It's like, buy my book. Easy as that. It's called The Art of Self-Destruction, the human guide to become the victim you never were. Because we all do want to be better. I think everyone kind of like strives towards that secretly. Maybe not everyone is admitting it, but if you ask someone, hey, would you be open to kind of like, be a little bit better version of yourself? Everyone wants to do that and wants to become that. And sometimes we're just missing the tools. And I believe in humor is a really great way to kind of sometimes they say laughter is the best medicine. So kind of like go buy my book. It's called The Art of Self-Destruction. It's a sarcastic spin on self-improvement. So not only will make you laugh, it secretly makes you better.
I love it. I love the book. I have one of the first copies.
You have the first copy, brother. You have the
You're right.
first copy.
The first copy. I have #1 print. Where can people find it?
It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon. The Art of Self-Destruction. You can get the KDP version, the Kindle version, or you can get a print version. You can go to the Art of Self-Destruction. No, artofselfdestruction.com and download the 5-chapter sample and test out how much you love it.
Hell yeah, I love it. I know everybody would love it. everybody needs to buy the book, get on it. And I know that if you are looking for somebody to come into your company and help teach everybody about sustainable practices, Malta's the guy for it. Well, thank you so much, Malta, for coming today. Another excellent conversation. We'll have to hop on and do another one of these soon.
Let's do it, Greg.